Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live Q&A for the month of March. I think this is episode 20, actually. Write that down. I think it's episode 20. So just a reminder, this is our live Q&A for anyone who is inside the accelerator or in any of the group or private coaching and who might have questions. You can ask your question in a couple of different ways. So you can put it in the chat. And if you do that, then my co-host will grab it and ask it on your behalf. Or you can raise your hand and then I'll take you off mute and you can ask your question live. So before we get started, me just say hi to our co-host. Hi, Mom, how are you?
Oh, fine. How are you today?
I'm good. Anything new and exciting on your end or anything you want to talk about?
Well, I did notice that you have redesigned the dashboard on the accelerator.
Yes. Yep. That's on my agenda. So I'll talk about that. Yeah, I will talk about that. So I thought you might notice that probably before anybody else. I just did it yesterday. I just did it yesterday. Yeah. So, and it's still a work in progress, but yeah, I'll talk about that. Okay. Anything else on your end?
My azaleas and my rose bushes are blooming, so that's exciting.
Other
than that, it's pretty calm around here.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And yep, you can close your camera now. And yeah, as I said, if anybody is on and wants to ask a question via the chat, then my mom will ask it on your behalf. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started. So let me start by getting this pulled up, and we're going to go over sort of what's been going on since our last month. And then since our last call, and then I'll go over the questions. I do have some questions here that came up and were sent to me in advance, so we will go over those. So let me just share my screen. Don't know why I'm having trouble remembering what. There's the share button. All of a sudden, I'm not seeing it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. So since last time, yes. So the first thing maybe you'll notice is that I did redesign some of the just the cover images. So the logo is still the logo that you've used to seeing this image, but I just sort of changed the text a little bit. The reason I did that is I started doing that for the things that I give out via paper. So many of you have gotten, for example, a copy of my first coaching companion workbook. Some of you may have participated in some of my live training seminars. And so those are all transitioning to this format. And so I wanted our website to be consistent, and maybe just a little bit of business insider information about why I'm doing that. So, I really decided to focus on marketing to businesses instead of marketing mostly to individuals. And so marketing to businesses, I decided to just kind of make things a little bit more sleek and streamlined in terms of the way they looked. And so I was able to find a content creator who specializes in social media content, workbooks, templates, things like that. I found one I really liked and bought a license to some of his content, and then just refreshed it with some of my own images. And so I started using that, and it was very widely appreciated. Got lots of good feedback from my private in-person clients. I do a lot of in-person coaching and workshops in Knoxville, which is where I live. And so I just decided, okay, I'm going to change everything to just kind of be streamlined, be a little bit sleeker, a little bit more like something that you would find, if you went to like a professional webinar or workshop or something like that. So that's the reason behind that. It's going to take a while to change everything. So all I did was the new things that I added, which I'll go over with you here in a minute. But the new things I added have the new logo, and then I change these two images that are just static on the dashboard. Everything else, as soon as you click off this front page, everything else is exactly the same as it was. It's just going to take a while to transition over, and I'm not in a huge hurry to do that, but I just thought I'd mention that to you all. And yeah, if you have any feedback on what this looks like, I'd be happy to hear it. Okay, so then that brings me to what we've added since our last session. So I'll just quickly go over. So first of all, we put the live Q&A, the summary, timestamps, and everything from last month. So that's been added. I added just sort of a self-reflection and a little bit of a coaching topic around letting your weakness, how I learned to keep my weaknesses from derailing my career. And so the reason this came up is I'm actually I work with the business school here in Knoxville, the Haslam College of Business. And so I've got 5 executive MBA candidates that I'm working with. And through that program, they do formal leadership assessments. And I talk in this note, in this post about some of the assessments that we use, and I like leadership assessments. They're widely available, they're widely used. The ones that are really popular, have enough of a track record to be able to really provide useful information to help you identify what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then even provide you some tips and strategies for closing any gaps or leveraging your strengths without overusing them. And so I like leadership assessments. And one of the things that I do is I debrief the leadership assessment results with candidates. They typically do that pretty early on in the program, as soon as they join, sometimes even before they even start. They've taken their own self-assessments, and then they've also asked peers, leaders, subordinates to fill out assessment data, and then they get all this information back, and that's raw material that we use to help put a coaching program and leadership development program together. And then I work with them over the 12 to 24 months, depending on what program they're in, and coach them on whatever goals they decide to make around these leadership assessments. And the first thing I like to tell them is that any data that you get, whether it be from an assessment, whether it be direct feedback that you might get from a supervisor or a peer, or a subordinate, or even somebody from your family, that all of that information is simply that. It's just a description of some behaviors that they've either observed or you observed in yourself. And sometimes those behaviors do not serve you well as a leader. And when that happens, I'm really quick to tell people that you can overcome these behaviors, you can change, you can become more move towards being more effective if you want to. And I know this to be 100% true because I have done that. And in fact, so I share one of my own results on this particular leadership assessment. It's called the Hogan Assessment. It's very popular in the sort of executive and C-suite level, very popular. And one of the behavioral risks that I have, and it's actually the only behavioral risk that I have in this assessment, but it is like off the charts. Risk is what's called the reserved characteristic. And so the reserve scale basically just says, you know, I'm not so much an introvert, not only an introvert, but my natural tendency is really to just I wouldn't say ignore people, but to really not move towards people. So what that means is I don't communicate a lot with people. I'm not looking to them to give me feedback. I'm not reading the room, if you will, or even reading just the people if I'm in one-on-one interactions. My natural tendency is to not do that. My natural tendency is to be very much self-reliant, which means that if we're in a crisis situation, you know, you want me in the room because I'm just going to do what needs to be done, whether or not people like it, but it's going to be highly effective. And I'm going to stand up and take whatever, you know, critiques or criticisms or whatever that come my way because, you know, these were my decisions. But it can really bruise people. It can sometimes bruise people's feelings. So that's this piece of assessment data I got. Can't argue with any of it. 100% accurate, no issues with the assessment itself. So then the question then becomes, okay, well, if that's true, then, you know, how could you lead these large global teams for most of your career? And then of course, now I'm a leadership coach, right? So I'm in the helping profession now. So my job is really to build rapport with people and to help them overcome their challenges. And, you know, I've got a wall of testimonials that says that I'm actually pretty good at that. So, so I, you know, how is it that I'm able to do those things? And the reason that I'm able to do those things is because I have learned how to change my behavior. And I have decided that it's important for me to do that. Not all the time. I mean, most of the time I still am reserved, but in times when it's important to me to be effective, to change that behavior in service of my goals, which in this case, my goals are now to serve people like you, then I'm able to change my behavior. And so we all can if we choose to. It's really growth versus fixed mindset. People typically tend to understand that very well when it's about skills, like learning, you know, when they think it's about learning skills or they think it's about, you know, changing other things. But for whatever reason, when people get this kind of feedback about their potential leadership, they tend to take whatever negative criticisms they get as like definitively true and unwavering. And so they'll either decide, oh, that must mean I can't be a leader. That must mean I can't, you know, dream big. Or they'll say, yeah, I'm like that. So what? And they'll kind of have a chip on their shoulder. Neither one of those are effective. And really the effective thing is to figure out, to acknowledge that those things may be true, and then figure out what you need to do. And so I put strategies for doing that. And then at the end, you know, I talk about, there's kind of 12 things that a company called Korn Ferry, which is a global organizational consulting firm, very highly respected. I've worked with them in the past. They talk about 12 common career derailers. And so I went through each one of those. I gave you a little description of how that can cause problems in your career. And then I gave you just a really simple cheat code, something very simple that you can do that can help you move in the direction of effectiveness. So moving away from it being something that could damage your career to moving towards a way to be more effective. So So that's in there too. And then I talk about what I specifically do about, being ultra reserved again on this particular scale. Well, one thing I comment is that apparently the Hogan folks have said, it turns out John Wick, the character John Wick, is also ultra reserved. So I just thought that was really funny. But then I just talk about my cheat codes for what I do is I smile a lot. That tends to make me seem as approachable as I actually am, even though, my natural tendency might be to seem unapproachable. I actually am approachable. And then I also use softening phrases. So what those are, I'm working with my sales coach, and she talks about, how when you ask a question, make sure you upspeak at the end. So if you say, oh, did you, is that what you want to do? And then you sort of ask this question at the top. And I've always struggled with that. I've never, and so I said, I usually have to tell people after, either in advance or at the end of me asking a question, that was actually a question, because I don't naturally do this upspeak. But some of the things I can do is just say some, what she calls softening phrases. So I might say, oh, I'm curious about why you decided to take that approach. So instead of just saying, why'd you do that, which might be my more natural way of speaking, and say, oh, I'm curious about why you decided to do that. Or instead of saying, what is your point? Get to the point. That's probably my preferred way of saying things. And I'd say, oh, what would you say are the takeaways? So again, these are just strategies, very simple. When I recognize, okay, people are maybe intimidated due to my natural tendencies, here's just some really simple ways that I can move towards a different direction. And it's really been helpful. So that's one thing that we added. The next thing I'll talk about, this one, this is just more like a little funny story. I talked about one time I went to, so I just happened to go to a really exclusive salon in Knoxville. I've been going there for about 15 years. And one time I had an issue where they weren't going to be able to see me, and I wasn't going to be able to get in there after for quite some time. And so they ended up giving me a replacement hairstylist. And as I'm sitting there getting my hair done, there's like people start crowding around us. And I'm just sort of like, what's going on? I wonder why these people are around here. And it turns out that it was actually the owner who was cutting my hair. And so I just talk about, okay, here's somebody who stepped in, he was just there sort of checking on one of his salons, and the person who was supposed to be styling my, cutting my hair, she knew that there was an issue. I'm an important customer, and she knew there was an issue. And so she sort of stepped in, asked for help. He rolled up his sleeves, did some grunt work, and, obviously cut my hair and did a good job. But I just talked a little bit about like the leadership lessons. If I take a step back and think, okay, what did he do as a leader that rectified this situation? And then of course we don't run salons, we do this highly technical work, but what can we learn from that situation? So I talk about the 3 leadership lessons, and I say, leaders do the grunt work. Leaders encourage their team to surface problems early. And I show many of examples when that doesn't happen. And of course, in our field, that can be catastrophic. When you don't raise problems early, people can get hurt or killed. And then also about how, he clearly communicates the values of his company so frequently that she knew exactly what to do. Like she knew, oh, I'm just going to ask Frank to do it. And she knew that was going to be the right call. And so just talking about how you can do that as well. So that's just sort of like the other thing I want to encourage you all to do is to really be thinking about, okay, where am I seeing leadership just out in my real world, and what's working well and what's not working well? Is there anything I can learn? Because the more you can really broaden your perspective and be willing to look at situations outside of your specific context, the more sort of natural creativity and just reinforcement of these different concepts you're going to get. So here's an example of how I'm doing that. I'm taking specific leadership lessons, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is like a totally different environment than the one we normally operate in. What can I observe here? What can I learn here? So I encourage you to do the same thing. Okay, and then the last one I want to talk about, and I really encourage everyone to take a look at this one because I think it's really important. So I was at a pitch competition for the Innovation Crossroads program, and that is the startup accelerator that is embedded in Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And I've been working with them for about 3 years. And we just last week, 2 weeks ago, I guess, completed the pitch competition for the finalists. So I have the privilege of being involved. All of the applications come in. I'm on the review committee for the semifinalists. So that's just an internal group. And we just sort of pick who should be then invited to the finals. The finals, they're invited to come on campus, Oak Ridge National Lab campus. And then the program leaders bring in executives, investors, founders from all across the country. That's their leadership council. They bring them, and 12 people pitch their ideas. And then we all vote on who should be considered to put forward to the Department of Energy for their investment. And each person gets somewhere on the order of $250,000 to $500,000. So you multiply that by 12, and you've got a nice sizable annual amount of investment in startups that is involved around this particular event. Now, not all of you are startup entrepreneurs. You don't need to be, I think, to get something pretty important out of this, because we are all in situations where we are trying to persuade stakeholders to invest in our ideas, whether that idea is around hiring somebody, whether that idea is about purchasing some capital, expending capital, whether that idea is really launching an entirely new technology program or anything like that. It can be as small as I want to hire one person, or as big as give me millions of dollars for this thing. We are in the business of needing to persuade stakeholders of various backgrounds to invest in our ideas. And so what I did at this event is I wrote down every single question that got asked. There were 86 of them. And then I did quite a bit of analysis on these questions. So I stripped out anything related to the people who were presenting or the technologies they were presenting, because that's all confidential. And we will all learn that at the same time when it's officially announced who the actual winners are. So I stripped all of that out and was just really, really focused on, okay, what are the common trends that I'm seeing here? And there's 7 types of questions that just kept coming up over and over and over again. And so I did a deep analysis on every single one of those types of questions. I share with you the topics that were addressed in each of the questions, why stakeholders, the judges, people like me and the other stakeholders, why we ask those kinds of questions, what's really our motivations. And then I tell you how to answer them to the best of your ability. And I give you kind of 3 levels. So a good answer, what a better answer is, and what really the best possible way to answer this type of question. So I really think this could be useful to many of you to kind of go through this and take a look at it and think about, okay, what is something that I'm trying to persuade people to invest in? If I know these are the general types of questions, how would I answer it in my context? And see if you can get the good, the better, or even the best possible type of answer. And then, of course, the other thing, the sort of meta learning on top of the little learning, the details about this is that I also talk about the question bank. So, I mean, me writing down these questions and analyzing them is using the question bank technique. And I've talked about it before, but I really want all of you to really be building up your own question bank when you're sitting in meetings with leaders, with peers, when you're at conferences, just not only paying attention to what the presenter is saying, but paying attention to the questions that they're getting asked. And as you start to do that, you will recognize, oh, okay, these are common themes in my industry. When my boss, presents on this topic, these are the questions that the CEO asks them. And once you start to notice those trends, then you'll be able to prepare answers, even be able maybe to change your presentation itself if if it's appropriate to actually answer the question in advance. But all of those things will just will really level up your ability to be persuasive. So I strongly encourage you to take a look at this one. Okay. All right, so let's see, did I add anything? Yeah, so that's what's been added since our last session. So let me stop sharing. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to questions. Okay, this is I want to restructure my organization because I think it'll be more efficient. How can I successfully implement the change? Okay. So this is a very important change management initiative. So I'm going to just the way you phrase the question, I'm going to assume you've already thought through it. You already know the advantages from your perspective as the leader of the organization. It's probably going to save time. It's going to save money. It might improve relationships with customers, those sorts of major factors. And be sure that you can clearly articulate what your rationale is. So that's the first thing. And then once you've kind of got that down, it's really important to formulate your communication in terms of kind of communicating your vision and strategy. So we'll link it in here, but I've got a video on that where I talk about that. But the general concept around communicating a vision and strategy is to make sure you have a visual, so a kind of a picture. And in this case, if it's an organizational change, it lends itself to a pretty simple, this is what the organization looked like before from an org chart standpoint. And then here's what the after picture is going to look like from an org chart standpoint. So, but having a visual that people can see is really important. And then also having a visual on this is the kind of time frame, the implementation time frame. And these are the main reasons. So if you kind of have maybe 3 slides that just sort of communicates your overall, this is where we're headed, this is how long, this is our time frame for doing it, and these are the reasons why. That's sort of the central communication piece that you can use as you go through your announcing and then continually to reinforce what it is you're doing. Now, the other piece that you need to do is you need to, in advance, expect objections, right? So nobody likes change, period. People especially don't like change. It's going to impact their day-to-day lives. And it's highly likely that this organizational change is going to impact their day-to-day lives. Even if it doesn't impact their pay or their work hours, even if it doesn't impact those things, and you might be thinking, what's it to them? But, they've built relationships, they've built their own workflows. And so all of those things are going to break when you change your organization. And so people are immediately going to say, oh, okay, this is going to be more work for me, at least in the beginning. And it's going to mean me, building relationships with people that maybe I don't know, or maybe I know and don't really like, or, you never know. And so from your standpoint as the leader, absolutely positively expect objections. Now, if you might want to do some self-reflection to think about what might those objections be. So some of them may be very general around, changing the overall process. How's this going to impact things? Some of them may be very specific. So there might be a specific person who comes into your office and just like, yeah, this is not going to work for me, and here's why. Because they've optimized their daily life for the way the organization was before. So from your standpoint, as I said, if you can anticipate what some of these objections are and have already either addressed them or at least be prepared to address them, I think that's really important. And so just prepare for that. And then the other thing I think in terms of implementation that could be helpful is if it's at all possible, and sometimes it's not, but if it's at all possible to pilot this change in a small way first, that can sometimes help with adoption. So people say, people like, okay, we're going to do a 60-day pilot with this part of the organization, or we're going to do a task force or a SWAT team or something like that, that represents the way you want things to be organized. That can go a long way to letting getting used to it. Also testing things out, letting them know, that you're open to feedback and alteration. If you're not, then, don't bother. Don't say you are. If you're not, if this is the way it's going to be, and now we just have to implement, that's fine. I mean, that does happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then the last piece is really to take care of yourself, because, plan some self-care, plan some, just downtime for yourself, because it is going to be difficult to implement, because people are going to feel personally attacked isn't the right word, but they're going to be personally put out by this, and those, you're the only person they can complain to. You're the only you're the one doing it, so you're the one to blame, and you're the only one that they can complain to. And so as they're processing what it means for them, and how they feel about it, and what things are going to look like as people are processing all of that, it's oftentimes going to fall to you to kind of bear the burden of the collective disapproval until change, until the change is starting to be implemented. So, and really taking effect. And honestly, I think if you were to reflect on it now, there's probably people still complaining about whatever change, whatever the last big change was that you may or may not have had anything to do with you. But that's just sort of the way that it works. So just to summarize, make sure you're clear on why you're doing it, what the advantages are from the organizational perspective, which is probably where you're coming at this from. Come up with a way to communicate it in a consistent way. I said, we've got that. We'll link out to the communicating your visions and strategy video, but it's really around having a simple visual that you can use as talking points. And then making sure that you're constantly communicating. You're constantly not only communicating the what and the how, but the why. And so anytime you're, in your staff meetings, and if you have an implementation task force on this, if you have your town halls, just making sure that you're constantly reinforcing the why, the what, and the how, over and over and over again. So people, it starts to sink in what's actually going on. If you can pilot it in a small way, great, do that. Anticipate objections. So if you can actually anticipate the content of those objections through talking to people, through reflecting on previous changes, that's great. So you can maybe even have some of those answers prepared when you announce it in your staff meeting or whatever. But certainly expect objections to come. And so, whatever you need to do to sort of manage your own frustration levels, those sorts of things, it's really important that you manage your emotional state through this, because it is what it is, which is to say people really don't like change. And as much as it makes sense to you, there's going to be people who are going to feel like you're turning their entire world upside down, because you went from having them have, their daily kind of check-in conversations with these 3 people, and now they just need to talk to these other these 2 people instead. That, just that kind of, you don't have to change what your work is, you just have to change sort of who you report to for these conversations or these check-ins. I mean, that kind of thing can really make people feel like their world is turned upside down. And so you just need to be sensitive to that and be prepared for working through the objections. And then the last part is just to take care of yourself, right? Plan your self-care, not only, just for you, but also because it's going to help you like manage your emotional state through this turmoil. So that is sort of my high level framework for thinking about a big organizational change. Really any change, but a big organizational change is something that you should kind of put some plans in place. Okay, the next one is that we let's see, we are starting up a new facility, a new pilot facility, and we've got a bunch of safety checks in place, and I just want to know what you think about kind of the safety planning that we have. So obviously you guys don't have their SOPs in front of you. So I reviewed, several standard operating procedures and kind of their safety dashboard and what they're planning for their daily management meetings and things like that around safety. And it was all very well done. So the comment that I want to make, and the reason I raised this question up here, because I did talk with them offline about this. So the reason I raise it here is because it's really important to understand that when you do some sort of first time or startup or event-based activity, and you have standard operating procedures in place, safety, of course, is extremely important. So safety-related standard operating procedures, but even just process-related standard operating procedures, just making sure that you get the quality of the work or the widget that you're making or whatever. When you have an event, startup, or a big change in equipment or something like that, a lot of eyes are on it. And when a lot of eyes are on it, you tend to be pretty good at making sure that all of the procedures are being followed. Okay, so sort of the startup or the event tends to be pretty well executed. It's the 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later or 2 months later, when that intense scrutiny and focus of multiple people has gone away, that people become complacent. And that is where safety and quality, maintenance, any of these kind of things that are meant to happen in steady state, that's when things can start to slip. And so it's really important that you embed frequent checks on all of those things if you want to maintain kind of the same level of performance that you got when you first started things. And so making sure that you, not only that you have the procedures, but that people are doing routine audits, not of the procedures, but of people actually doing the work. And observations may be a better word than audit. So I think observation people might prefer that word, but making sure that you're looking, you as the leader too. So of course, if you have a multi-tiered organization, you want to make sure, direct line supervisors, you want that to go all the way up. But you as the leader, and I don't care how big your organization is, I don't care if it's 2 people or 2,000 people, you need to spend some time observing what's actually going on with the people that are touching the stuff that you sell. That's just something that you need to do. Now, do you need to do it every day, every week? No, but you do need to do it at least once a quarter. And that is where, one, you're letting people know that you care about it. It is something you actually care about it. But 2, you're observing and really, with fresh eyes, making sure that, oh, okay, I thought we were going to do it this way. Why have things changed? And making sure that those observations happen. The other thing that I really like, if you're to the extent you can be open with this, is bringing in people who don't know anything about your business. Completely outside eyes every once in a while, to just come and take a look and give you some fresh perspectives. I know that I have done that occasionally with some of the entrepreneurs that we work with. Of course, I understand, I mostly work with them in like an office environment because we're working on coaching and implementation of processes and, more like administrative managerial processes. So I typically am doing something like this on a Zoom call with them. And every once in a while, I'll go to their laboratory and just sort of walk around and look around. And that's when I can see, oh, okay, well, your safety glasses policy is not being implemented uniformly across the lab. So you might want to take a look into that and see what's going on. Or, you don't have a clear walkway, labeled walkway from point A to point B or something like that. just those sorts of things. I'm not there every day. Of course, I've got many years of experience in doing safety observations, so that helps. But you can also give someone a checklist and just say, okay, here's our standard operating procedure. Here's what was supposed to be done. Just hand it to them and somebody that you trust and say, here, take this. Now go observe this stuff being done and just jot down what you notice relative to your SOP. And that can be really, really helpful. Just can raise some questions. And I'm not saying that, everything that is observed is wrong and needs to be changed, but it can be really helpful to have somebody who's not there all the time, just kind of taking a look at things. So that's what I'd recommend. Again, yes, this specific question was around safety, and we're putting a new pilot facility in place. Can you look at our standard operating procedures? We want to make sure that this, that this startup launch, it goes well. And honestly, I mean, obviously they care about their people, so I'm not suggesting they don't. And we're getting a lot of high level potential investors and stuff like that. We're going to be coming around. So it was sort of like, usually, can you make sure that this is we've got everything we need. So did that, and recognizing that when the sort of intensity of the event is done and people go back to their day-to-day jobs, that's when your vigilance can reduce, and when you need to make sure you've embedded checks, observations, all the way up your organization, from whoever's actually turning the wrenches or pressing the buttons, up through to yourself. Have those planned, and that they're being conducted, and that they're being debriefed, and that any potential issues or problems are being surfaced freely and proactively, so that we ensure that the people are safe. So one aspect is safety, but the same is true of quality. So quality control, maintenance, things like that. All of those things kind of fall into that same category. Okay, and the last question, this came up a couple of different times. So I'm gonna actually show you a tool that I'd like for you to think about. But the question is, I'm applying for a new role. How do I position myself? Okay, so let me just share my screen, and I'm gonna share with you, you hopefully will instantly recognize what I'm working with. Okay, apologies here, let me just pull up this file. I thought I had it handy, but okay. So the way to position yourself is to be able to let's see, I'm sorry, what am I trying to do here? I want to share not just my, let's see if this will work. Okay. The key to being able to position yourself for a new role is to be able to paint a picture for how your qualifications and experiences fit the role. So you're going to need two pieces of information in order to do this. So the first one, hopefully, is very obvious to you. This is our accomplishments inventory. So if you don't know what it is, this is just a little table that I highly recommend everyone just keep up to date, which is a summary of your accomplishments. And I specifically suggest that you write down a description, the success metrics, why it was important to your organization or someone else, so that's external, and then why it was important to you. And constantly update those things. I ask you to do that. It's going to help with your own sort of self-esteem, overcoming imposter syndrome. It's going to help with your performance reviews. It's going to, and it's going to help with interviewing and hiring. And so I want to talk a little bit more specifically about that. So here's a piece of information that you're going to need. Now, when it comes to putting your CV together, the second piece of information that you need is a job description. And so I just randomly picked a job description just for the purpose of helping to kind of go through this exercise. And so hopefully you can see the job description. I'm not sure what exactly you can see. Screen sharing. See, Mom, can you tell me, can you see a job description? Can you come off mute and just, yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. So here's just a random job description. I just typed in Chief Innovation Officer and this popped up. So I don't know why. But all job descriptions, they have basically the same kind of structure. So there's job duties here. And then there's experience. And then there's other knowledge, skills, and abilities. So in this particular thing, what you would do is you would go through here and do your best judgment of identifying what the most important job duties are, what the most important skills or characteristics are. And let's see. So I'm just for the, I'll maybe do two examples here. Determines trends, relationships, impacts, and problems as it relates to the life science industry. Okay, so hopefully this will work. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put it over here. So I'm adding some columns to our accomplishments inventory. Okay, and these ones are going to be job specific columns. Let's see here. Another one I'll pick up. Okay, successful track experience building relationships, networking, and influencing CXOs. Okay. Grab that one. Okay, and I'll grab one more. Again, just to okay, addresses and course corrects partnerships concerns diplomatically. Okay, fine. I should have picked a job description that was actually, it's not a very well-written job description. This is probably more common than not. So we'll just, okay. So now you've got, so on this side, you just got your job, kind of your accomplishments. And now on this side, we're going to call these sort of job description. Okay. So now we've got 3. Now you're going to go through and pick as many as you need. There's 3 is not, there's no magic number in 3. I just picked 3 for illustration purposes. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go through your list of accomplishments and you're going to say, okay, which of these accomplishments has demonstrated that I determine trends, relationships, and impacts and problems? And you're going to maybe, just put it next there. Which of my accomplishments, you've got this long list of accomplishments. Which of these is an example of me building relationships? And you're going to say that one. Okay. And then you're going to, do you understand what I'm saying? So then you're going to go through these accomplishments. Oh, and by the way, you may have an accomplishment that, that does everything, which is often the case too. Which of these, shows that I've diplomatically course corrected a partnership. Okay. So you're going to then go through and map your experiences with the specific qualifications, duties, however they wrote it, with some specific things that are in the job description. Now, this job description, I used a poor example or a bad example. This job description, oh, I guess not. They've got it listed over here as other. So, I would, sometimes it's listed as required and then preferred, things like that. But just, use your judgment to decide what the priorities are, right? So if you've got one that's like preferred or required, see if you can't, go ahead and just transfer all of those over and then just see how many of your, your accomplishments match with the different things that they're talking about. Okay. And so then once you've done that, once you've gone through your accomplishments and said, oh, this shows how I did this. This shows how I did that. Then what I suggest that you do is you can actually then go back and revisit your descriptions and consider writing out answers to interview questions that actually embed some of this language in. So for example, if you were to say, if I wanted to say building relationships, if I wanted to talk about my experience building relationships and influencing CXOs, you know, if somebody says, tell me about a time, this is hopefully the way they ask the question. Can you tell me about a time when you've had to build a relationship and network with CXOs? And then you could say, yes. And then you say, okay, so here's what I did. And then you just go and say, here was the situation. Here's what I did. You know, here's what I achieved. Here's the success metric. And here's why that was important. And you can actually say, okay, and here's how I had to build relationships with the CXOs in order to accomplish that, or something like that, right? So it's about mapping your list of accomplishments that hopefully you already have because you've been doing this for a while, listening to this for a while. You already have your list of accomplishments. That's unique. That's specific to you. Now you're going to get a job description, analyze it, pull out specific job description qualifications and duties that are listed on that, and then just go through the exercise of mapping your accomplishments. And so then when the questions arise, you can specifically say, you already know, because you've done the practicing, you already know, okay, I can specifically speak to this job, this requirement through this specific accomplishment. That's really the way to do it. I think that so I did this when I was going for my Chief Innovation Officer role at Opera, and I ended up writing, which is the next level down if you wanted to. I wrote down kind of every single accomplishment through the lens of these different job descriptions, and I just wrote them on note cards. And so I had this stack of note cards, and then I just really just practiced delivery. And that's actually something I do a lot with my private clients is just say, okay, let's mock interview, and I will take out the job description. I'll do exactly what we just said. And I'll say, okay, tell me about a time when you had to determine trends and problems related to the life sciences industry. And then I would wait for them, and they would say, okay, and they'd talk about their accomplishment that mapped to that. And then you just keep going. So the important points here are a couple of different things. I'm trying to stop sharing here. Okay. So first of all, when you have a job and you're applying for a role, your goal is to paint a picture that you have the experiences that match the qualifications. And the way that you do that is to prepare for that. Well, the way that you do it in the interview is you talk about your experiences, and you make sure you use the language and the contextual language that's specifically asked of you by the hiring manager, and which should match what was on the job description. So you should be able to say somebody, if you hear some key words that were on the job description, that should trigger in your mind, okay, this is the accomplishment I'm going to talk about. And the way that you get there is you take your accomplishments inventory, and then you grab the job description and you pick out the key characteristics, and then you map your accomplishments to that job description. So that's the other thing too, is if you want to put it on a CV or a resume, you can do the same thing. You can make sure to embed some of that language into how you describe things in your CV. And so kind of once that matching is made, then that's how people in their minds think, oh yeah, I could see this person doing this role. I lost my train of thought. I was going to say, oh, I guess so the point there is that, like, a CV, a standalone CV, it's good to have one, but really you should have a specific CV and a specific set of sort of interview prep for every job description. And it should match kind of as best you can with the job description that you're applying for, so that you've done the heavy lifting of making that direct comparison. The last thing a hiring manager, they're not capable of doing it, they don't want to do it, is to try to think, oh, I wonder if what they mean by that is similar to what's on this job description. You don't want them to have to do any of that. You want to spoon fit it to them using the exact terminology that was in the job description or as phrased in the interview, and do that one-for-one match for them. So that is how you position yourself for new roles. Okay, so those were all the questions I had. I don't see any online, so I think we're good to go there. I'm just going to check. So our next meeting is going to be May 15th. So I will see everybody then. Okay, thank you.